Our next panelist is Steve Sullivan, and he's from the Small Business Administration in Washington, D.C. And his focus is, and his unit is all about exporting and the resources that they have available. Thank you, Steve, for joining us. And I'd like to give the floor to you now.
Thanks, Karen. Pleasure to be here. And Anne, it was great to meet you virtually. I look forward to working with you in the future. I love the energy. So why don't you jump to the next slide, Karen? I want to go over kind of SBA's three main areas where we support small business exporters. So the first area is business intelligence. So our trade policy division heads that area up. SBA.gov/trade tools is a website designed to help businesses understand available resources, get you started on developing your export business plan, and identify target markets. This division also provides guidance to companies confronting trade barriers or looking to overcome specific challenges to global market expansion. And finally, SBA's trade policy experts represent the interests of small business in trade policy and trade agreement discussion on the interagency and bilateral or multilateral front. So we're still on that first slide, please. So that's kind of our nutshell description of our trade policy group. Our grants division is probably the area most relevant to the prospective exporter, as these grants can be used to help companies begin or grow their exports. The grant that SBA administers is called the State Trade Expansion Program, better known as STEP. Not every state participates in this grant, but fortunately Maryland does. And we have somebody from that office who will speak after me to let you know about the grant specifics and a little bit more about what they do. And then finally, SBA's Office of International Trade has a finance division which works with banks and businesses to support government guaranteed loans to small business exporters. So the 90% guarantee that SBA offers gives the banks the incentive to make funds available to small businesses that otherwise fall under their comfort level on the risk versus profitability scale. So currently we have 20 export finance managers around the country responsible for territories covering the entire nation. Maryland's representative is housed in Arlington, Virginia. I'll go into a little more detail on each of these areas in the following slide. So next slide, please, Karen. So just a little more on the business intelligence side of things. I wanted to make sure to mention that the Trade Tools website is available in English and Spanish. So great resource for kind of if you have Hispanic-owned businesses that are certainly growing a lot, and it's sometimes an easier route for them to look at resources in their language. But it's really, again, a one-stop website for information on exporting and importing, which is nice, kind of the variety of information in there. A lot of stuff on kind of what's going on with the USMCA is the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. That's kind of the hot thing at the moment. So you can get more on that in there. And then certainly the customs and tariffs, intellectual property, and e-commerce information. But I think that the kind of the most important resource from this office is the hotline. And so we actually have people who will answer questions for you. So you can call toll free at 855-722-4877 or send an email to international@sba.gov. They're great at kind of referring you on to somebody who might be able to help you depending on your stage of the export process. A lot of times they will refer kind of new to export companies to our partners in the small business development centers who we work with a lot on the international trade front, providing counseling and certification on international trade to the SBDCs. And then they also have a program called Fast Track Service, which is kind of like they'll sit down with you and figure out where you are with the whole exporting journey, kind of a more in-depth study, and help connect you to the appropriate resources. So next slide, Karen, please. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that not every state has STEP. I can tell you that the STEP director is really focused on making sure as many states as possible tap this resource. The funding nationwide for next year was recently announced at $20 million. And so the max amount for a state would be $2 million for a state, or 100,000 is the minimum just to be part of the program if you want to participate. It's a matching grant which states can tap to increase significantly the support they provide to small business exporters. So listed here are some of the typical expenses that we cover with STEP funds. So a lot, there's participating in virtual and in-person trade missions, trade shows, international partner search, or Gold Key, or programs from the Commerce Department that Michael will talk about in a little bit. We've invested a lot in website optimization for global sales. This often involves folks setting up a website in another country, which really helps their distributors connect better with clients. So just the foreign market entry services, market research, training workshops. I'm not sure if, I think Maryland has an export tech program. I'm not sure, but there's a lot of different training opportunities that could be considered for step-worthy financing. Maryland's Office of International Investment and Trade would be the one to tell you specifically what they're focused on. But in general, STEP does these things, marketing and media. Eric will talk a little bit about kind of a new thing that STEP is getting into supporting related to Ex-Im Bank. And so it's sba.gov/STEP to find out the states that are offering it now. Again, we have somebody from the Maryland office coming on to speak next, so they'll provide the local contact information for that. So next slide, please, Karen. Okay, so I wanted to put a slide up that gives you a feel for some of the reasons that a business needs financing to support international trade. So, for instance, payment terms to customers, basically by saying, okay, you can pay me in 120 days instead of paying me up front. A business might need financing to be able to do that, and frankly, that makes them a lot more competitive overseas, being able to offer terms so they can do more business, bring in more clients because of that. Proactive marketing is another kind of requirement for international trade. You need to get your name out there, your product out there. And so you might need financing to support that increased marketing. Purchasing merchant machinery or equipment to meet international demand. This is basically just saying, hey, you might need more space or more machines to be able to produce more to sell overseas, and SBA has programs that can help support that. Financing international purchase orders. Again, it's like you need your working capital to be able to produce the product to respond to a purchase order. And then another example is bid bonds or advance payment or performance guarantees. Sometimes a foreign buyer will ask for a bid bond, which basically saying you're going to give us a performance guarantee up front. And so sometimes our programs finance that type of thing. So it's just to kind of give you a taste of some of the areas of international trade that you might need financing. Could you jump to the next slide, please, Karen, just to see kind of our specific programs that we offer. So I do want to note that these programs are available both to direct and indirect exporters. And And so by an indirect exporter, we mean a company that maybe is selling a product to another company that's a component of a larger company that's selling those products overseas. So like an example of something we might see a lot of is a company that makes little plastic like rug floors or something for cars that go in. They're not selling directly overseas, but they're selling to an auto provider that's going in and being part of a product that's going overseas. So those companies like that are eligible for our programs as well. So like Export Express lenders can directly underwrite a loan without getting prior approval from SBA, which allows you to get capital quickly up to $500,000. Export working capital loans allow small business owners to apply for loans in advance of finalizing an export sale or contract. So that gives the exporters greater flexibility in negotiating export payment terms. And then finally, international trade loans help small businesses enter international markets or make investments to compete with other importers. These offer a combination of fixed asset, working capital financing, and debt financing with SBA's maximum guarantee of 90%. Again, that's a $5 million limit for that. These are often kind of longer loans, whereas the export working capital loans often turn over in a year. These could be kind of much longer because you're purchasing fixed assets that allow you to increase your sales overseas. And then that's sort of the quick overview. Last slide, please, Karen. Just sort of a reminder of some things on the SBA export resources front. We do have another tool that was put together years ago by SBDCs. It's the SBA Export Business Planner. I mentioned the Trade Tools website has some information on export business planning. This also is a great tool. We haven't updated it for a while, but it's still useful. If you Google SBA Export Business Planner, you'll find that. And again, like I mentioned before, a lot of the new to export companies can really get some good initial assistance in export business planning, in particular from SBDC. So you could always Google find an SBDC to get your local, your nearest SBDC. And again, you got the Trade Tools website. You have the sba.gov/STEP for more on the STEP program. And then sba.gov/international is where you can go to find those counselors that you need around the country that are doing our trade finance work. You could also search on your web site the find an SBA export finance manager will get you there as well. And then again, most importantly, the direct contact international at sba.gov. And I did want to mention before I close that we do have a big webinar planned on May 17th. I think Karen's going to include some information on that. And this is a great opportunity to hear from other businesses that have gone through this process, tapped some of our funds, and they're all, actually we have 3 businesses that are all clients of SBDCs, I think out of Illinois, Virginia, and South Carolina. And they'll just talk about their experience working with the SBDC and tapping different SBA programs to help them achieve global market success. So you can register via that link. I'll also put the link in the chat after I'm done. So turn it back to you, Karen.